Hey, what's up, guys? I actually have no title for this video, but I wanted to do this interview with legendary caster, esports caster, Semmler. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this interview is because Semmler is a bit like me in the sense that he is one of the few guys I know who have done a lot of cross esports stuff throughout his time period. Has jumped from esport to esport, has been part of a lot of different scenes, a lot of different titles, right? A lot of different communities. And what's interesting to me about that is when you think about like when you think about ideas like knowledge or ideas about how you do something, like if you've ever heard that quote from Musashi, which is goes like, if you know the way broadly, you know the way in general, or it goes something like that, right?
You read Five Rings?
Yeah, it's a great book. You
Oh,
should
that's good stuff.
everybody should definitely take some time to read that, right? But basically, it when you think about knowledge, it's more about a matter of method than it is specific to knowledge. And I think like Semmler would be one of those guys who would know more in general because he is one of those people who has like you are one of those people, I guess, who have like gone through so many different things. So I wanted to ask you questions about your casting, how have you gone through each of the esports, and just general thoughts about some stuff we'll get into. So my first question is, like, you've done this for a long time now. I've gone from I think it was Bloodline Champions was the first.
Yeah.
Yeah, StarCraft 2, CS:GO, Overwatch. Was there like a specific kind of process that you built over time, or is there like an idea or philosophy behind how like you deal with casting as you go from game to game?
Trust in yourself, essentially, is what the. I mean, I've had many iterations now over the years in terms of how I approach different games, but you can boil it down to be yourself and do a little bit of the legwork at least, obviously at the start. When you're trading games, you need to be able to just speak on the game, obviously. So even if you're doing play by play, you need to have a grip on the game and understand what it is that's going on in the game before you can even really get hype about it. Because otherwise, you're going to be thinking too much about what's actually happening on your screen rather, in order before you can actually do the commentary. So what I think it boils down to really is just trust yourself. I mean, when you get into it at the beginning, you're just looking for as much experience as possible on all fronts. So when I started, I did Bloodline Champions. That was commentary, and that was play by play with, and I knew Bloodline Champions well enough to be able to do color as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I got that initial like fix for being able to do the kind of the tasteosis kind of flow back and forth between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where I landed on that style of commentary where we just need to be doing flow rather. So I guess that's hmm. The method is know the game enough so that I can get hype and I get excited watching it, and then figure out how to get my style into it, which is to do like flow commentary, not so much the rigid roles, but to have more of a back and forth conversation with my co-commentator and the audience, and to have a bit more banter and a bit more fun. That's eventually the end goal for any game that I get into. I want it to be fun for everybody, because if somebody's having fun and they're watching the stream, if they're having fun, then they'll probably watch again, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
probably want to know more about the game. And that's me doing my job correctly. If they feel like they're in a lecture hall or a classroom, and I mean, it just sounds like they're getting numbers or whatever spouted at them, then they're not necessarily going to have fun, and they may get bored and they may leave, and then that's it for that viewer, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I don't necessarily have a process per se apart from trusting in myself to just have fun.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You did touch about something interesting. There is like you say, like you have to trust yourself, but a lot of it does come to the fact that like at least in esports, there's no, it's all caster pairs. Like even though you can like
Yeah,
swap around the caster pairs and stuff, and so
sure. That's a business decision. Yeah.
yeah, but you can say you can trust yourself, but I think a lot of it does come down to like your synergy and being able to trust your partner. So like how do you go about doing that then? Because like regardless of what kind of relationship anybody has with somebody else, it's always going to be a give and take in terms of like individuality and in terms of like working
Yes.
together and stuff, right?
I've had a tremendous amount of luck in being able to meet Anders and meet Hex. I think those are my two big partners over the years, right? Anders, obviously, and Hex in Overwatch League. You're right. There is quite a bit of synergy with your co-commentator, right? You need to be able to. The way that I approach it with a co-commentator is mainly, can I sit down and have a beer with this guy? That's really what it boils down to, because we need to be on the same page, especially for my style of commentary, or for how I think commentary should be done, which should be a bit more on the memes, a bit more on the light fun side,
Mm-hmm.
cracking jokes and whatnot. I mean, you need to be able to hang out with the guy like you're at the bar, or you're at a friend's place, you're at a barbecue or whatever, and you guys need to be able to hang out and shoot the shit and talk about things and have the same kind of humor, right? You need to be able to crack a joke, and then your co-commentator isn't going to leave you hanging, right? He's going to chuckle along because he sees where you're going. I mean, that kind of synergy, yes, is very important. But before you can even get there, you need to have the confidence in yourself, right? So that's why I say you need to trust yourself. Is before the only thing that you can control in a broadcast is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're able to start making some progress on yourself and start feeling like, right, I'm comfortable, I know what I need to do here, I know how to open the show, I know how to close the show, I know how to get an interviewer involved, I know how to relate this bit of information. Once you have all those sorts of things on lock, that's the stuff you can control, and that's the stuff that you really need to just get down, nailed. And then you start looking for your co-commentator. Then you start looking for your partner. And I would say, yeah, it's a partner. It's a partnership more than anything. The joke with Anders, Anders and his wife was, I've been dating Anders. Oh no, joke with Anders with his girlfriend, Anders with his wife. I mean, we've been in a relationship longer. With Anders at the start had been in a relationship longer than I'd been with my wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then his wife was always bitching because she was just like, wow, you're spending so much time with Semmler, right? So, but that's kind of what you need when it comes to your co-commentator, that you need to have that relationship where you guys you're fundamentally on the same page. There's no bullshit. You need to have trust. You need to trust in one another to watch each other's backs. You need to have that. But I wouldn't put that as the priority. I think working, like figuring out what makes you tick and figuring out what makes you happy comes before going for the the rare bird chase, because that's what the co-commentator is. Your partner is you're hunting around to see if you can find a match, just like finding a chick or a dude. I don't know, whatever you're into. So I mean, that's what it boils down to, is trying to figure out that partnership, but you need to do that after you figure out what your game plan is. You can't. I think trying to find the perfect partner before you figured out what it is that makes you tick is just going to lead to awkward spots down the line where you're going to change your opinion on things, or you're going to think of things differently, and then you're going to have to address that, and it gets weird. But if you've got a good grip on where you're at in terms of how you want to do your commentary, then the rest can follow. And you'll have a better idea of what it is that you're actually looking for in a partner. Because if you're like, oh, this is my style, this is my humor, these are my jokes, this is how I want to roll with the show, then you actually have a place to go off of in order to find somebody who will match you. Whereas if you don't quite have a grip on that yet, you're kind of following a mold, or you think, oh, this is how commentary should be done, and so I'm not really doing my style, I'm kind of trying to do this other commentator style. It just leads to complications. So whenever somebody asks me about commentary, I'm very straightforward with them, where I'm just like, focus on getting your basics down and focus on figuring out what you need to do to be comfortable in the cast, and then for yourself, and then the rest will follow. Then figure out the rest.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, like, this actually does remind me a lot of. There are a lot of different ways I can go with this, but I guess
sure. I mean, we could talk about this all night, just that one topic alone.
Yeah, because this isn't just about like this is more broadly just about what it might mean to be an individual, or what it might mean to be a person, or what it might mean to be like a competitor in a sense. Because like, if you think about like any field you're trying to excel in, the first step is actually trying to find who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what exactly it is you can do and how you're supposed to enable yourself. But that's a very hard sort of thing to get into. So
Well, it can be painful. You may not like what you find.
Yeah,
You know, that's one of the things that people have a lot of trouble with inspection is you may not like what you find. And then what do you do? Do you go into
yeah,
denial? What do you do? You know, how do you handle that sort of
yeah,
situation?
yeah.
I mean,
Spent.
casting a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna get you there. You're gonna start figuring it out pretty quick if you cast a lot because it becomes apparent. You there's no dodging it, right?
Yeah, like after 800 hours of laddering, you realize you're a cannon rusher. It's
Ugh, man, StarCraft 2 is just driving me up the wall.
that's kind of
It's so good, but it's so frustrating to
yeah.
play.
Well, I mean, the more investment you put into something, the more enjoyable it is. Just in my
Hmm.
view. We'll get back to that later because that's another topic I'll touch on. But okay, so here's another thing I wanted to ask you, just in terms of your casting style, because you kind of touched on it at the beginning. We talked about the tastosis style, and for those who don't know, I'd say the
Yeah.
tastosis style isn't actually like, I'd say it's really free flow. And what I mean by that is like
Hmm.
there's no true designated role between the two of them. We're talking about artosis and tasteless here because they'll flip between play by play and color commentary and banter and all that, right?
I think it's a 60-40. I
It's a
think
60/40.
Dan has probably got 60% of the analysis,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think it's more of a 60-40 in terms of analysis and play by play. So like play by play will be much more towards Nick, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
tasteless, and then the color still lands a bit more towards Artosis, towards Dan. But you're right, they do have that flow. That was what I was trying to do back in the day. That was where I thought that we needed to go. But I wanted to take it a step further with Anders. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to take it a step further what they were doing, where I didn't want it to be a 70-30, a 60-40. I wanted it to be a 50-50
Mm-hmm.
right from the start. I wanted it to be just full on flow from start to finish. You know, if there's something to analyze, whoever's got the mic is analyzing. There's something to get hype about, whoever's got the mic is analyzing. Oh, we're filling time, cool. Now we just have a conversation like we're watching the game at home on the couch. You know, that's exactly the kind of commentary that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But Tasteless and Artosis were definitely a blueprint at the start. They were the shit, dude. They were the commentators that everybody looked up to. They It's hard to put into words how much of an impact they had on the industry, not only for the viewers, but for the actual commentators coming up. I mean, everybody watched what they were doing, and I loved them. And I was watching some still freaking hilarious. I was dying the other day just watching. They've still got it. I mean, they've been doing it for so long now, and they're still able to get some jokes in there. The banter, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's tough, but at the first, I think you were coming from that CS model of commentary, that Quake model of commentary, or well, it was mainly a sports model of commentary where it's hard play by play and hard color. This guy only talks when he's got a stat or something to say, and then this guy is the one calling the score and the time, and right,
Yeah.
everybody has their role really fixed, really cut and dry, and that's how CS was before Quake was. And I wanted to break away with that with CS, and we got lucky enough to do that with CS:GO because it was such early days that people didn't know better, right? The new CS:GO fans who are
There's more
coming in.
time for experimentation.
Well, it's just that you had the 1.6 hard fans, but
Mm-hmm.
they were such a small audience compared to the massive, gigantic CS:GO fan base that we were bringing in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that we were able to train a new audience in how we thought commentary should be done, and then they just didn't. That's just the way it was done, right? There was
Yeah.
no former model to point back to, at least in their eyes.
Yeah. Because that's like that's always something funny about human nature, I guess. Is as long as you don't really know you want it until like it shows up, or you like
That's the market, right? That's
yeah.
business for you right there, 100%.
Mm-hmm. Nobody really knows what they want until it appears in front of them. Like, oh yeah, that's definitely it. But
And why didn't anybody think of this before?
mm-hmm.
That's the experience.
Yeah, like basically you had to start with like what's the word I'm looking for? I guess you had to start with like a niche space or like a blank space, like something that didn't have immediate preconceptions for it to kind of
Hmm.
bloom up, come out of wherever it was coming from. All right, so let's talk a bit about. All right, actually, I don't know if this is the case, but is there when you're casting games, is there like a difference between casting like a team game compared to like casting a 1v1 game?
Yes, because in a 1v1 game in general, you have more time to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, I've been listening a little bit to StarCraft 2. I've done some casting in StarCraft 2 back in the day when I was actually eligible to cast it because I could actually play the game and understand it. These days, I'm questioning my ability to do anything with
Well, anybody
StarCraft
can
2
cast
anymore.
Haas if you've ever seen that guy play. He's amazing. But
Uh, dude, the throwbacks. I mean, I'm really appreciating Ben. Like, the Muslim is such a baller and a half. I really appreciate his commentary and his
mm-hmm.
gameplay. I watch his stream a lot. Him
Yeah.
and I go way back. He used to sleep on the bathroom at the Tiraso house for the good studio back in the day. So he's an old homie. But the difference between a 1v1 and oh man, it's just, you can get so much, you can get really into nitty gritty with 1v1 because you can really just say, like, there's the factors are reduced. You don't have the random team factors that can play into it. I mean, I was just thinking about this right now because I'm reading. I've rewatched the movie. I don't know how many times, but I'm reading the book Moneyball
Yeah.
by Michael Lewis. Have you read that one?
No, I never did, but probably should because everybody tells me about it.
I would highly recommend it. I have not been able to put it down. It is so freaking good. I started it yesterday morning with my coffee, and I've pretty much just been chewing through it this entire time. It's so good. But the reason why I bring that up is in terms of detail. How deep do you want to go in terms of detail, and how deep do you want to go with stats, and how deep do you want to go with all of that?
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized when you're trying to play the game or train for the game, all of that information is really valuable. But when you're trying to build a broadcast for a game, it's
the reverse.
Value. Exactly. It drops a little bit. I think over time, what brings value to the broadcast is not so much the hard, heavy stats, etc., the deep dive into hard statistics. I mean, there is an audience for that. But I think the vast majority really care just about excitement, about story, about emotion, about having a good time, enjoying themselves while they watch. So that being said, like, the difference between 1v1 and team, and then team, it depends on the game. If you're casting LoL or Dota, you have hours to riff. So you can be really entertaining because there's not things that are happening. And so you can just go off on a tangent, talk about, hey, man, that bench, and then just talk about something else. And then come back to the game when there's action, or you have all the time in the world to kind of point out this particular strategy that they're doing. And maybe that worked last time, maybe it didn't. In a game like Overwatch, I find it very challenging for commentary because it's pretty much nonstop action. It's very hard to get the details into a broadcast in a meaningful way, because you can throw out stats, you can throw out stuff like that, but then do you have the time to explain the value of those stats or the value of those strategies or whatever tidbit that you just dropped? It's really hard because if the action kicks off again, what are you doing? Are you ignoring the action, or are you getting into it? Whereas in a 1v1 game, because like team games, you have so many moving parts, so there's always something to talk about. It's just jumping all over the place and it's very chaotic. Apart from CS, I think CS is the best team game because you have that rhythm and flow of the rounds.
Yeah.
So you have that action for 20 seconds, and then you'll have a little bit of a dip and a rise and a dip. And there's a very, like, CS is a very flowy game that makes
it's very based around the economy, which, like, I don't know if I told anybody this before, but I think in terms of raw narrative structure, CS is the best game we've ever seen.
Absolutely. Hands down. It's the best esports, hands down. But that's just because it has that rhythm, and it's fun with CS. It's not until you go somewhere else and try something different, like me with Overwatch or Dota before it, or League of Legends, back in the day. It's not until you have that perspective, the variety of games out there, that you realize just how freaking good CS is.
Mm-hmm.
But from an esports perspective, it's a toughie, right? Because you're still talking counter-terrorists and terrorists, right? So that's a bit of a hard sell.
Like, people trying to change that to, what was it, offense, defense?
Offense and defense. I did that back in DreamHack.
I'm fine with that. Like, I don't really care.
Yeah, and I got so much shit for it.
Because that's what I did. Shit for it, but I think
it's in 2014, man. That's what I did. The major, I was calling them offense and defense, and people were just like, so fucking. They were just getting all razzled at me. But the reason why I started doing that is because I started talking to actual business guys who were trying to sell, sponsorships for CS tournaments, and they're like, dude, is there any way we can maybe think about this a little bit? That
particular word is like very hard to sell, right? Yeah.
Yeah, terrorists and counter-terrorists. There's like, dude, can we like do anything here to like maybe alter this to make it a bit more appealing so that we can actually have money, so we can actually run tournaments and have a pro scene and all that jazz? I was like, you know what? You're making a strong argument.
Mm-hmm.
So you start thinking about it differently.
Yeah.
But But how all this, just to answer your question, how this all ties back into a 1v1 is that a 1v1, the variables are so few. You are looking at two players, and then you get to just I feel like you have a lot of freedom to just get into their history, get into their character, get into their personality, just get into all that juicy stuff, and then have some moments to riff. If you're talking StarCraft 2, for example,
Mm-hmm.
you got those moments in the build up to riff. Here's this tidbit, oh, I spoke with him before the game or after the game or the last time they played, or you have a lot of room to work with in a game like StarCraft 2 that I think is really nice, and it allows for the commentators to really build the story and show what they're capable of.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in a game like Overwatch, I feel like commentators are very much more limited. It's such a fast-paced game, so you can show obviously, but you don't have as many opportunities to really get in there and have fun.
Yeah, here's the thing about Overwatch, I guess. Here's how I'd explain it, or like the difficulty I'd explain it is every round is a rifle round. If you're comparing
every
it to
round
CSO,
is a rifle round, and you just don't get any. There's no they teleport straight onto the base.
Yeah, but it's like faster than a rifle round, so it's like you're instantly in there.
Yeah, there's no like setting up the smokes and setting up the flash and clear all the map to get info, and then they're gonna maybe more info, and then they're gonna finally set up for the bomb. It's like no. Overwatch is like you get the 5 seconds where you see their roster, and then you have the 10 seconds it takes them to run onto the point, and then it's action time, and then you're basically in a bomb take for 50 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever. With goats, however long it lasts, lasts forever. So you just have action
all the
constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very much it's been a really interesting challenge for me as a commentator how to approach it, because it is just nonstop action, and you need to find places to breathe in there. Not just you, but the viewer needs to find spaces to breathe where they can take it in a little bit rather than just constantly being bombarded with these minute-long goats fights, right?
Yeah, it does remind me a bit of like a Michael Bay film. It's like you just keep going and going and going, right? Like that's.
But it's a challenge. It's interesting to me. It's interesting because it's like
it's different.
It's very different from CS, and it forces me to have to come up with a different strategy, which is very fun for me. So I enjoy it for sure.
Like because when I was trying to analyze this, like before going into this interview, I was thinking about it. Like, what's the difference between like Overwatch and the other games? Like, if you're talking about like CS, like I already talked about that a little bit, but if you talk about like StarCraft, right, compared to Overwatch, like there is a like the reason I actually think or not the main reason, but one of the reasons I think Tastosis were so effective originally was because StarCraft allowed them to display everything. I guess that's the word I use. Like if they're basically, because StarCraft is it's a 1v1 game, so you're allowed to go as deep or as little or as deep as you want. But what I mean by that is like you can go into that character history in terms of the players or matchup history, the builds, the decisions they're making or whatever. But you can also do the reverse. And what I mean by that is because both of them kind of understand when like a game is kind of shit, they understand immediately like we can reverse this. We can just go like full banter mode, just keep making jokes on jokes on jokes on jokes, right? And that's
absolutely.
And that's something you can display in StarCraft 2 way better than like a team game, because a team game you've got 10 different guys at least like running around whatever. So like as a caster, your first thought would be like, oh, I have to talk about this. And now that that's done, we still have like 9 other different things, or perhaps like the teams or whatever. And I think that's been like the biggest challenge I don't think anybody's answered in Overwatch is there's, at least for like from a caster's perspective, or when I'm listening to these casts, is nobody has figured out. I'm not even sure if it's possible, so it's not like, but basically nobody's ever figured out how they're supposed to fit in the rest of the meal, I guess is the way I put it. Like if you're talking about Overwatch, like you're just getting like meals of meat over and over and over again. You're not really getting a lot of variety in terms of what a caster is potentially able to say. Because let's say like there's how do I explain this? Okay, here's how I would break down. Here's generally how I analyze games, right? So if we're talking about Overwatch, there is first you have to think about the team history, and what I mean by that is like the core of the history of the major players in the team, because even though like a 6-man lineup is different from like let's say NYXL is different from last season to this season, even
Sure.
though but there's a continuity, there's a similarity there because most of the main players are the same, right? But like you go to like
Yeah.
Shanghai Dragons, everything's been wiped out, right? So you have to think about the team history, then you have to think about the player history, and we're not just talking about like 12 players in Overwatch, we're actually talking about maybe 18 to 20 per match, because players can come in, players can come out all the time in that particular game, right? Then you have to think about the meta and how the meta affects each of these factors. Then you have to think about the individual like sort of tendencies each of these players have and how they kind of interact with each other. And then like basically if you're trying to formulate a story, it's possible, but not with the time you guys have, not with the timings you have, not with the amount of information you're gaining. Like it doesn't really matter. Like the problem with Overwatch in terms like how I see it in terms of like somebody casting it is there's just so much fucking information in it that no that you're and there's so much information in it, and a lot of it is pertinent to what you're trying to tell. And so basically what happens is you get like very odd moments or hard moments where like I can kind of guess like, oh, this guy has like 8 or 9 different things he wants to say, but he has to only pick one right now, and he can only and then that one he has to stick with for like the rest of like the cast, because if you jump from point to point to point, it becomes a worse sort of story. And as you pointed out, like when audiences are kind of watching, they kind of get more invested into stories, and that's more of like a human thing, right? So like yeah, so so it's just a very complicated problem when you're looking at Overwatch. Like,
You have to, because there's no way, especially like, I mean, I think you can tell when I'm casting like Chengdu Hunters or something like that. You can tell how easy it is for me to cast them. All of a sudden, it's just, hey, there's a Pharah, and we have some damage, and they're running DPS, and that's much more of a straightforward. Let's get hype. Let's have fun. Let's get in there because things are gonna die.
yeah,
And it's very easy for me to get the part, like get across, and for Hex, to get across the key points because they're right there, obvious on your screen. Whereas with goats, it's unless you are a true acolyte, right, and you are you are studying, to be able to pick up the subtleties of what a good play in goats is versus a bad play, and what made that play good and what made that play bad. We'd have to sit there and talk for freaking 20 minutes. Like Sideshow had a whole stream going where he would just freeze frame every like 3 or 4 frames of the freaking stream. He would be pausing it and be like, right, so now, and then talk for 2 minutes and then unpause for a second, pause again. Okay, right now. Like, how can you do that? You can't get that kind of detail across in an actual cast live. You can't dive deep into this kind of meta unless, and then, well, you just never talk about what's actually happening. You just be going on and on about theoretical or just examples of what this might mean, or this happened, or this might have backfired, or what you need to do in this appropriate situation, blah blah blah. Oh, and by the way, they got a kill there. Like, it's very hard when it comes to the current meta of Overwatch to not have it turn into a classroom. So yeah, therein lies the challenge right now with the meta. How do you just have fun with it? And I think that's the main thing that that Hex and I try to figure out is that, yeah, you touch on the big ones if there's any big mistakes, or you try and make it so that people try and understand, but the broad strokes. And then if they're having fun and they're enjoying themselves, then they'll stick around, and then they'll figure it out. They'll eventually learn, right?
All right. Let me ask you this. This kind of related, kind of not. When you look at team games, right? I've always been of the opinion that even though team games are supposed to be about the team and whatnot, it's actually better straight up for the cast and potentially the scene if individuals can pop the fuck off. And what I mean by that is like the way like people view games or people view sports or people view competition is like, even if you're talking about like a team versus team situation, inevitably one or two guys will always like rise above the rest, and then the story sort of becomes more about them, and it makes and it like basically simplifies and polarizes the entire like narrative around them. Whether that's true or not is up for debate. Like, for instance, like I think in like the NFL, I think is like complete bullshit. Like, because there's so many fucking people, there's no way one guy ever decides a game, right? But like if you're talking about like the NBA, maybe it is true, because in the NBA, like one guy can really fucking change the game, right?
Sure, you can have the Jordans, the Kobe's, the LeBrons, or the Currys, right?
Yeah,
running around.
But like in esports, because it's so new, nobody's really come up with the idea of come up with like an answer of whether or not it's better to have like a team game be more based around individuals rather than the team. What do you think about that?
Well, again, I think CS was the perfect example of that, because you could have the gods. You could have your Device, your Kenny, your Olaf. You know, these players in their prime, they dictated. I can't think of a single player that players feared as much as Kenny in his prime.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe Faker in League of Legends.
Olaf ever feared, right?
Yes, maybe you know, Faker in League of Legends, whatever. Like there's across other games, but I mean, in CS, in terms of CS, Kenny was so dominant for a period that nobody wanted to face him. Nobody wanted to play against him. They didn't want to be on the same server as him, because they knew that he could just do crazy things that they just can't even contemplate, and they're going to get railed. So I think CS is that game that allows for that individual level to just dominate no matter what. You had Olaf Meister running around with a freaking Tech 9. I mean, it's a pistol. He can do that every round and just wreck you, right? That was when Fnatic knew that there was nothing stopping them from winning the server from winning the match apart from themselves. They didn't have opponents per se. They had themselves, but they were so supremely confident in their ability to dominate that the only outcome possible at the end of the match was that they were winners. They would win. You know, that's just allowed for the Olaf Meister and the JW back in the day, and you know, just for these guys to just do outright crazy stuff. So I mean, CS, I think, is the game that really allows you to have that. I think it's funny, you know, we were talking about Moneyball earlier, but now it occurs to me that I think that what's going on in Overwatch is essentially Moneyball. Is the change going from the flashy like Kenny Olafmeister individual plays, you know, just the massive hits, right? The home runs, you know, just the smashers. And GOATs is essentially just how often do you get on base and how often do you get runs?
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's not glamorous, but if you're walking, you're on base.
Yeah.
And if you're hitting, you're on base. And then the more people you have on base, the more runs you get. And that's essentially the GOATs meta. And that's probably what Overwatch is now, is a shift over to the most efficient way to play Overwatch. And it's going from a game where it focused on the Widows and on the star players and the flashy plays and the Pines and oh my God, awesome, to actually, this is the most efficient way to play this game, and that's how we're going to do it. Even if it isn't glamorous and doesn't have the flash and doesn't have the hype, that's how it's going to be done, right? And it's the kind of shift. I mean, people just care if you're winning. If you win at the end of the day, then great. That's how you get the win.
Yeah.
That's what the players are coming to, or the coaches at least are coming to the conclusion of.
Yeah, that's the coaches' world. So here's my question then. Because this is like a question I think literally every Overwatch person has ever thought. Is it actually better if you try to force it out of the GOATs meta, and whether that's by like forcing the 2-2-2 or like potentially reworking a bunch of like
you'd have to do a massive rework,
right? Like, and
when you're talking about, I mean, what I think it boils down to, and I haven't done much research on the topic. Just because when it comes to the pro scene, I'm going to be dealing with GOATs, and so fair enough. But it has occurred to me to try and think well, hasn't Jeff talked about this as well, in terms of the player base that actually deals with GOATs is so infinitesimally small that in order to do a rework for balance sake, it's the case of how do you balance a game like Overwatch where you balance for the pros and for the casual player. right? The guy who's just
Yeah.
playing a couple hours of Overwatch here and there, just having fun. He's running Torb. He doesn't care about what the current strategy is. But when you start getting into the more and more competitive levels, you're talking about such a significantly smaller and smaller and smaller slice of the player base. So this has always been the dev question. BLC, StarCraft 2, CS. I've had so many conversations with devs, and it's just where do you put your time, where it's the most valuable to put your time, and are you going to try and sink your time into something that may only cater to 5% of the player base, whereas it might screw 95% of the player base.
Yeah.
And so, 95% of the player base are what's paying your bills.
Mm-hmm.
So, you don't want to you're not going to take it as a dev immediately, right? Just think, oh, we need to do this to fix this because this is what's happening in Overwatch League. But then hold on, we might inadvertently kill our game if we do that, because the vast majority of the player base don't even know what GOATS is.
Yeah, like here's the thing. Here's always been my counter argument to that is like, well, they don't know what GOATS is, right? But would they know what comes up next after that, after you change it? Probably not, right? So really, here's the question is, and no devs ever actually answered me, like one way or the other, is exactly what happens when you try to like balance towards the top 5%. Like, do all 95% just give up?
You get BLC.
You get BLC? Is that what happens?
That's what happens. And then you get BLC, and then BLC initially started being totally balanced towards the top end. Mm-hmm. And then eventually it started getting more towards the casual end, because it turns out the devs have to make money. And to be fair, everybody needs to pay their bills. Totally fine. Yeah. But you saw that that shift. Nobody knows. I mean, the tough thing is are you going to go, yeah, you need to do it on a small scale like BLC and see what happens, versus, taking a million, billion, I don't know how much money they're making, like a lot of money game, like Overwatch, a massive game like Overwatch. Are you going to start really tinkering with that and ruining the golden goose? Like, I don't know.
I mean,
that's a toughie.
Sometimes you got to flip the coin or whatever, but
you're right. But then I guess you don't have, the massive investment.
Yeah, but it's not like I'm
and like, you did what now, right?
I mean, sometimes you got to go full Ice Frog, whatever. Like, here's my question, I guess.
Ice Frog is almost unique in the gaming scene, though, isn't he?
Yeah, because because nobody's ever actually talked to Ice Frog, at least publicly. I'm sure privately people actually know who he is or whatever, but
I've never met him.
Yeah, but like here's a question, like because I've watched Dota for a long time, so I kind of have a general feeling of Ice Frog's basic philosophy, and his basic philosophy is like you have to give as many like artistic possibilities as possible to the players, and then let them decide it, let them run through it.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, but that requires time.
Right. Like he had he had way more time than anybody else in the world technically, because he was working on that mod forever. So
yeah, that requires time. You need to be able to throw things at somebody and then just let it sit. And you have to be willing. It's like, I don't know, shorting a stock, or I don't know, like how you would compare it. You're basically buying stocks, and you're just waiting, and you're waiting, and you're waiting, and you're waiting to see if the desired outcome happens or what it actually does, right? But you got to sit and you got to take that risk. You got to make that change, and then you're just going to sit and wait.
Yeah.
How many devs have that luxury to be able to just make a change and then sit and wait and see what the players do with it?
Probably none anymore. Like I can't.
Right, the CS:GO devs had for them it was just make a change and put it live, and just test everything live. The R8, like just fuck it, we're doing live. That was one of their approaches. I mean, here we get into the messy bit. At the end of the day, though, it's all money, right? Mm-hmm. So you're taking risks with something that is working, or in Overwatch's case, is working, obviously. So, I mean, are you going to go for radical changes like locking? I mean, I heard of that. I heard that argument. To me, that sounds a bit much, because it seems like it goes against the entire idea of Overwatch, which is supposed to be the flexibility of being able to flip into 4 DPS if you want to. If you feel like that's the best situation, the best scenario for the situation, you should be able to do that. And so I feel like a hard lock on roles would go against, I guess, the spirit of the game. but then you do still find yourself in a situation where tanks are really strong and supports are obviously really strong. So unless you do a radical nerf, like what's the answer there? Yeah, but how do you radically nerf the tanks to make the damage better, where they're not just obliterating everything, where you just run 5 DPS and 1 healer? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know how that works.
Yeah, like
I mean, it would be way more exciting.
It would be, right?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Everybody who hears my commentary knows that when a damage dealer gets picked, I'm just going, I'm having a ball. But
I mean, there's a reason Pine was voted for the All-Star shit. Like, even though he hasn't played for like a year, right? Like, people remember that shit.
He hasn't played at all this season.
Yeah, right.
But you're right. I mean, that McCree play was so sick. It was unreal.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, but those are the hype moments that will imprint. That's the thing. Those are the hype moments. That's the funny thing. That's again coming back to the Moneyball thing. You know, it's like you'll remember. I don't know baseball well enough to be able to name. You know, like any whatever, a Babe Ruth. You know, just smashing home runs through. You'll remember that guy forever, right? Like we do. Like a guy who's me, who doesn't really follow baseball, who knows Babe Ruth off the top of his head. There you go. Right? What do you do? Smash balls into the seating. But who's actually winning the game in the end? It's the guys who are just getting on base. And that's what GOATS is. It's just the guys who are getting on base. They're playing support, they're playing tank, and they're just getting on base. And it's not flash, but that's currently how you play the game to win.
Yeah,
and don't make a mistake. These guys are here to win. So they're going to do the most efficient thing. Even if you definitely freaking know that any of those damage dealers, I mean, you're just watching Carpe die a little inside every time he has to lock a Zarya in, you know? You know that guy just wants to freaking put Widow in and get headshots, but it's not the most efficient way to play the game right now.
Yeah, it's it. I guess we're going is going a bit more technical. Is like the problem with Overwatch, if you're talking about balancing it, is like the areas you're balancing it are fundamentally they don't work together. What I mean by that is like Widow, Tracer, McCree, like Pharah, to a lesser extent, I think, like heroes like these are all mechanical based heroes.
Yes.
Right. And you talk about like Reinhardt, I suppose Winston to a lesser extent, but Zarya, like the support heroes outside of Zenyatta, right? They're all positional heroes. Like and these are straight up MOBA characters, right? But like
yes, ability driven heroes. Yes.
Yeah, but like the problem with like these ability driven heroes compared to mechanical heroes is like if you're trying to let's say for instance like both are potentially viable, right? In some mad world, both are potentially viable. In this mad world, I'd say everybody would eventually revert to the mechanical base style because it inherently gives those talented enough an edge over the ability based style because there's a higher ceiling to hit. That's all there is.
There is a higher ceiling to hit, but this is why we don't see much damage right now is because you need to play perfectly to make damage work. That's the whole strength of GOATS is the fact that you can make repeated errors. And players say this all the time. You can make many mistakes with GOATS and still be in the game. If you make just a couple of mistakes as damage, you're done.
Yeah, man.
So you've wasted a minute and a half or you've wasted a minute and a half worth of push time because then you have to go back and change. And then, hey, you wasted probably because you still have to build ults in order to catch up, to have a proper fight. I mean, so playing damage right now is it's a tough situation for the Overwatch players because you're allowed so much more room for error if you run tanks and supports.
Like nobody's brought this up. Maybe it's because none of the StarCraft guys ever switched over to Overwatch. But basically, we're in the Broodlord Infestor era, straight up. Like,
oh man, those are glorious days.
Listen, man. I've seen so many people fucking die. So like, I saw my boy MVP like literally die trying to win with 5 slip disc and shit. Like, come on, this shit is like real. Like when this shit is like really hard. Like, I think what's weird about, I guess, this entire thing, just going off of a tangent, is like the mechanical heroes, like they require like the level of execution required to hit those peaks is very, very slim, whereas like you get way more, like you said, you get way more leeway. In that sense, I think like the ability driven heroes are just way better, like straight up, like it's easier to do.
Oh yeah, that's the whole point. But then you get into that thing. How do you balance around that?
Yeah,
I think that they released Ash because they were like, oh crap, we've released a bunch of ability driven heroes. We need to come back to a mechanical hero here, and eventually that's what led to Ash. But it's still a balance between the two. And Overwatch, it's not Overwatch is a first person action, first person shooter, first person. I mean that is the idea, but it's like a marriage between FPS and MOBA at the end of the day. So you're gonna get some characters, you're gonna get some heroes that lean towards the ability side, just like you're gonna have some that lean towards the mechanical side.
Yeah, and they haven't really figured it out. Like the only other answer I could give for this is like you have to fundamentally redo the game modes. Like I think that's the only
You would.
answer.
I don't know,
But I don't even know how that would work, right? Like that's
it's a bit of a pickle. It's a pickle if you don't just loving life.
mm-hmm. But like, all right. So here's actually, should I go that way or that way? All right. Well, since we're already here on this topic, I'll ask you your own question. I'll ask you a question just about competitors in general. So like when I what are they? I think one of the criticisms like Monte Cristo had about the Outlaws is basically they were stuck. They never found their own style. They never had their own character, right? Talking about like the last stage, and one of the criticisms I have of like a majority of the teams outside of like a handful of them. So like Chengdu, Runaway, Shanghai,
Runaway.
Shock. Yeah, like I call them Runaway, and that's
okay, elitist.
I no, it's just what happened in my fucking brain. But like, fine, call them Titans or whatever, right? It's all the same shit in the end. But basically, the question I have for you is like, because like I compared it to the Bruno and Fester era, and Bruno and Fester era, if there was ever a time to like completely give up on your own style of play and play just raw infestors, that was the time. And if there was ever a time to completely give up on your own style of play to play goats, I think now would be the time. All right, but as somebody who watched a bunch of games, who's casted a bunch of games, do you think it's actually better for teams or players to play towards this meta, even though it's like way easier to execute, or should they find like whatever their personal style of play actually is?
So I see why you bring up Chengdu, because Chengdu are the only ones who really did do that.
Yeah, they started off there, right? Like they're the most extreme. Like some other teams have followed them.
I've tried,
but like nobody's quite as extreme as they are.
But it's cost them. It's cost Chengdu. I mean, I do appreciate that. I do appreciate the purity in Chengdu, where they are just going to say we're going to play our game whether it works or not. And it turns out that if you run damage into goats, a lot of times it doesn't work.
Yeah,
but they still they still do it. They still do it, and they still stick to it. And I'm sitting there like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you guys are doing it. But I mean, at the end of the day, this is a competition, and in a competition, barring breaking the rules, you're going to do whatever it takes to win.
Yeah.
And so that's what these guys are here to do. They are not here to they are professionals. They're not here to play damage if they want to play damage or whatever. I'm a mechanically based player, whatever. No, it doesn't matter. You do what you need to do to make the team win.
Yeah.
That's at the end of the day. So I don't think that there is any, ideal world where we start seeing teams, like a gentleman's agreement to ban goats. They're going to be like, no, we're here to win, and this is the most efficient way to win, and so we're going to keep playing this style, and that's it. The end of it. I mean, maybe we will have those moments here and there where it makes sense to run something else on a particular map, Anubis or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, these guys are takes. That's the long and short of it. And so Goats is here to stay, because that is the most efficient way to play competitive, professional level Overwatch.
Yeah, but like here's how I would phrase it, right?
Okay.
Let's see. What is the best? There are quite a few examples I could point out, but basically,
point out to me your utopia in which.
No, like all right. Here's the thing, right? Like, let's say, for instance, who is? All right. I'm gonna make up a matchup, but basically, think about it like this, right? Remember, the old phase lineup before Kerrigan joined, right?
Okay.
That was like that lineup was based off of like just raw firepower, right? In a sense, just much.
Yes, they believed in getting 5 superstars together and just
Right. Now you run that into like, let's say, actually you don't have to make this matchup like Fnatic back then. Fnatic was like what they were, except better in everything, right? Now,
well, Fnatic were the perfect marriage.
yeah,
They had the raw firepower
power and like the team play,
and then they were the perfect marriage. They had Flusha and JW who could read each other's mind.
mm-hmm.
It was
maybe not that one. Maybe
Fnatic was a true perfection beast.
well, like all right, throw them against maybe modern phase. You don't really know that much about it, I imagine, but like basically you got Nico, Rain.
I'm pretty happy to see my boy Neo back in the game.
Your boy
Let's
Neo.
go.
Your boy Neo's pulled out a time stone somehow, like resurrecting Olaf, whatever. We'll see how that goes.
It's unreal.
Right? But
Neo's gonna know what's up.
Yeah, but basically, like if you throw those two lines to get against each other, right? Like the former lineup, the old one, would have zero chance against this new one because they have very similar strengths, except this new one is way better in terms of the raw strength, right? In the same sense, then, like when you look at Goats v Goats, I've watched a lot of it. I try to think about it a lot, and the problem with the Goats v Goats matchup is I think the better Goats team will almost always win. And
yes,
right. I think that's a testament to Shock. It's a testament to
yes.
Titans, right? Like if you're the better Goats team, you'll always win. So I think
Shock have gotten extremely lucky as well. The fact that they had Sinatra just as a Sinatra is one of the best Zaryas to begin with since the beginning of Overwatch. Mm-hmm. Having him in a Goats meta is kind of OP, but fair enough.
I mean, they have plenty of OP players right now, so they've built the roster that way. But if you look at
the
it,
Church of Krusty,
yeah, right.
The Church of Krusty.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay.
So if you look at it that way, like I don't like if you're trying like. There are certain teams where you can't think of yourself as like I can be the best team, but you can think of yourself as on the right day I could beat the best team, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where I actually think Chengdu made the correct choice. Like nobody can ever really know this, but I think Chengdu would be worse if they went pure Goats.
Yes, well, we saw them try and they failed. That's why they stuck to damage.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that's always been like my contention with like a bunch of these Overwatch teams is like I think in theory, in some of them they should actually play. I won't say play DPS, but they have to find like very specific like styles of play or like weird different like paths of play to enable their better selves in a sense. Because if you're just playing the standard style, you're just becoming like a pale imitator of whatever is better out there. And I don't think that'll give you a chance to win. Now, maybe it'll give you more success in the short term, maybe even in the longer term, because if you're taking that gamble, there's no guarantee it'll work, right?
Hex would agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with you. But Hex was the one to really start putting this forth where, if you're going to lose trying to play Goats, why are you even playing Goats? Why are you trying to throw crazy at them?
Mm-hmm.
Come up with something different. Play to your strengths. I don't know. You got a guy who likes to main Torb. You had. I mean, you go with that. Go with that sort of thing instead of trying to constantly mirror against a team that is clearly the superior when it comes to Goats. Right. It's very hard for teams that the weaker Goats team to shine against the obviously superior Goats team.
Yeah. Whereas like the thing like
taking Chengdu it takes a certain amount of courage because you're gonna have to take knocks. You're gonna have to get beat up a bit. And Chengdu certainly hasn't all been roses for them either. I mean, their record isn't that great. They're sticking to their guns. They're doing their thing. But it's such a hard way to play Overwatch. It's such a hard way to play Overwatch when you may have a different way. Mm-hmm. But I see your point though. Like against the top, I think it's you use Goats against teams that you'll beat with Goats, and then when you're going up against a Shock or a Titans, you need to just
you need a different answer. Like
cross your fingers and hope. But then what's going to happen is you're going to throw that at them. It's not going to work, and then you're going to like crap. Now we got to play Goats, and then that's not going to work. And what do you do? You know, if you're the underdog in that matchup, it's tough.
Yeah, like the way here's the way I think about it. If you're talking about Overwatch, like if you're one of these lower teams, like I think you have to be willing to lose a bunch of these matches in order to learn what your style is. Like all right, so I've been writing an art. Actually, I don't know if I can call it writing. I've been researching an article, trying to figure out exactly how Simple became who he is, right, in CS:GO.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the shit he does is him just like from flip side Hellraisers to flip side to Liquid, right? A lot of the shit he did was him pushing boundaries, right, and willing to fail in a sense, right? And because he kept pushing it, kept pushing it, and it just happened that for whatever reason, the way his career worked out, he never had like a Glaive or a Kerrigan or some kind of all-time great leader to really show him the way. So he was kind of just left there in the dark for a lot of his time. And so he kept pushing his like very aggressive opening, like very aggressive opening pick style, where like he could die at any single moment. And so he's actually similar, like very similar to JW, like high kills, high deaths. But because he but because he kept practicing it, and because nobody ever stopped him at any point in his career, up until Zeus joins, and like by then he's already completed his style. Basically, what I'm getting at is like he had to fail. I won't say he had to fail, but he had to like run into that wall like 3-4 years. But then when he broke through, he literally became the greatest player CS:GO had ever saw. Right? And I'm not saying that's the same for these lower teams, but I am saying is like if you want to find this specific style that gives you even a chance to beat those top two teams, you have to be willing to take all those knocks.
You have to be willing to take those knocks, but then you've got players like Stewie, like Simple, like Kenny, where when they're coming up, that's all they do is play CS. The number of times where Simple finishes a tournament and an hour later he's already streaming FPL.
Yeah.
There's a reason why you get these players that are gods. It's because that's all they do is play CS. I mean there's obviously talent, but there's also like a mania or a focus that is hard to reproduce in others. I don't think you can right? You can't just be like, you're going to be the next Simple. Like, but do you have that willingness that is, you know, Stewie or Simple to finish 10 hours worth of CS competitive and then stream for 3 or 4 hours and just keep playing, right? Immediately into FPL, just keep playing. Even though you could obviously be like, hey, I played all day today, I'm done, right? Like that's it. No. Those guys put in the extra 3 to 4 hours. And that's what is giving them that additional level on top of the talent, obviously. I mean, in terms of like just what creating a team of Simples, I don't know how you would go about creating that. You need the
Simples,
raw.
But like basically, like all right, here maybe Simple's not the best choice because I think he's like super iconic in what he does. So let me give you an example of like
he's got the work ethic. He's just got this insane work ethic on top of the talent. That's what that's where you really see what is possible is a guy who's willing to just work and not stop working. On top of being just ridiculously skilled.
Like I think he makes it impossible look normal. So like he's really really
funny. I mean, dude, the number of times I've seen that guy hit jump shots with scouts and what, it's just like, dude, from across the map, you're like, come on, what? Like, how does that even happen? How can you do that?
Yeah. So here, I'll give you an example of somebody that makes more sense in this context. So there's a StarCraft 2 player from Taiwan. His name is Haas, and he's a Protoss player. And I shit you not, I think he is literally the mechanically worst player I've seen in any game. Straight up. It's mechanically the absolute worst. Like, he has worse force fields than Elfie. He has worse micro than anybody I've ever seen. He has worse macro than everybody I've ever seen. But he did make it to a WCS finals. And how the fuck did he do this? He cheesed his way. And not only did he cheese his way, he's cheesed his way for the last 5 years. This guy is literally the cheesiest player the StarCraft 2 world has ever seen. But he is complete shit, right? But he is complete shit.
I don't know. I mean, if he's cheesing his way to the finals.
But here... Like any StarCraft 2 hardcore player, hardcore watcher knows this guy's complete shit. Like I've seen him throw away there was a time where he threw away like a 100 supply army lead because he is that bad, right? That's just who he is. But here's the thing: if he played this
Gives
guy,
me hope.
If this guy played a normal game, he would lose every day, every week. But he came to this conclusion very, very early on in his career, and he realized, I'm not good enough to play a normal game, so I have to play a different game, and I have to find my different answers. And so he started finding new cheeses. This is like a very niche game, but
Dude,
you'll enjoy it. But basically, the first time I ever saw this guy play was in Taiwan against MMA way back in the day.
Fuck,
And
yeah,
MMA is like, and MMA is legend. So he's like, oh, this is normal. I'll just play this shit, right? This is what my boy Haas did. He started with a cannon rush. Then he did a transition into what looked like a gateway proxy void raid rush. MMA scouts is like, okay, so because like when he saw the cannon, he's like, I guess I'm gonna have to bust out with siege tanks. And he saw the void raids, like, I guess I'm gonna have to get units. And then he comes out, and then what does he see? He sees a bunch of tempests, right? And this is the kind of madness that is Haas, right? Like this he basically like completely confused MMA, beat him. And then he goes on and he plays like this guy's upset a bunch of people. Like he played Jaedong once, and he literally did like a 7 pylon wall against Jaedong's natural. Jaedong's like, what the fuck is this? And then Bill Campbell behind it is like, what the fuck? And then he lost, right? Like this guy is fucking wild, right?
I'm gonna go start watching this guy.
I'll send you links. I'll send you all the best highlights of this guy's play, because this guy is a legend for this guy is not really a legend, but he's like, what even are you? Like
Dude, I love how when I Google his name and it pops up, it's like StarCraft 2 ?
Yeah.
There's legit a question mark at the end of it. Is it this guy? Haas? Is that a thing?
Yeah. Well, I'll send you the fucking games, but this guy is the literal worst player I've ever seen mechanically. But he has done so much more because he cheesed his way out, kind of. Like and I don't want to say, and he's basically like forced a style that allowed him to do way better, perform way above the line of where he actually is as a player. Like go ahead and ask any StarCraft person you know, and you ask them about Haas, be like, yeah, his like results are way better than they actually are, because like he's upset Jaedong, he beat MMA, I think he beat Marine King, like he's actually like eliminated a few WCS players, like. But in general, like you look at his results, it's generally trash. But like the times he does succeed, it's because he was willing to do this like off the wall style. And all I'm saying is like if you're willing to recognize the fact that you're not that good, that you aren't like fucking Sinatra and Zarya, maybe you should like find your own path.
Oh, he got wrecked by Cyril in the WCS Valencia.
Well, Cyril might be the greatest foreigner of all time. That's not a problem. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
But no, I'll show you the fucking highlights. Like you will like I'll guarantee you this 100%. Like no Protoss players ever played like Haas. Like not even SOS. Like for all of this, not even all SOS, for all his fucking cheeses plays like Haas does or did. Like this guy's fucking wild, right?
Wait, but when did the Korean team shut down?
The Korean team shut down 2016.
Yeah, it was 2016, right? Yo Flash Wolves.
Yeah, 2016.
He was on Yo Flash Wolves, right?
Yeah, Flash Wolves was like a Taiwanese team, but like it's kind of a weird team.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at I'm looking at this here because I had that argument with Monty and Wolf. Man, StarCraft 2, Cyril, so sick to watch and all that, and they're just like the ultimate, Korean esports elitists. They're just like, yeah, well, obviously the level's like really shit these days because the Korean teams are like closed and all that. I'm like, Jesus. Way to suck all the out of the room, boys.
Here's how I'll explain it. I think 2016 was the worst year because not only did the Korean Kespa teams die out, but like basically all the Korean players are like, Jesus Christ, what am I going to do in my future? But then they're like, wait, fuck, I'm just going to keep playing StarCraft. I guess, whatever, right? And then after that, I'd say like afterwards, 2017 onwards, like you're going to get less. There are obviously way less players than before.
Yeah,
but I think like the players that are around, like it's a similar quality, I'd say, to like 2011 early 2012 ish, like that around there. But of course, there's certain caveats here. Like I think if you're just looking off topic, but basically I think like Muta players are basically dead in StarCraft because the Muta itself is dead. So like, and like there's like odd stuff like that. But in general,
you can still go Muta and Protoss, like against Protoss.
Yeah, but like you know,
specifically
in my heart, I always think of Muta versus Terran. So it's just
same. I know I run Muta and then I just cry a bit on the inside.
Yeah, but like when you win, it's so much better. It feels so much better.
It does. You get Lingbane Muta out there, man. It's satisfying.
But yeah, where the fuck was I in? I guess this was kind of an interview.
This has turned into a conversation now.
Yeah. Okay, let me see. Was there? We've gone pretty far into this, but let's see. All right, I guess I'll go to my last question because here's the other way I was going to take this question, right? Because like on one hand, like this is just more about game theory. Like I think in general, it just makes more sense to play to your own style or finding out who you are as a person and playing to that rather than playing to like a specific meta. Because in general, like emphasizing your strong points will give you the chance to break through rather than being an imitator of somebody else. But here's the other part of the argument, I'd say, and I'm going to CS a bit. I think the player that this idea reminds me most of is Shox. And what I mean by that is like when you look at the way Shox plays through most of his career, like I don't necessarily know if it counts now, but for most of his career, this is a very free flow sort of, and he has a lot of great game sense. I think he's probably smart at the game, but I think he's very artistic in the way he approached the game. He's very individualistic, right?
Sure.
And when you look at the way his personality works out, the way his player profile works out, like I don't actually know if he would have done better if he tried to play like if he tried to grind hard. And what I mean by that is like in some weird sense, like the way his play style was almost emblematic of his lifestyle, I guess, is how I'd put it. And so when you look at if you look at the way he plays and then you look at the way he talks about the game at times, like I think he recently did an interview with Ocelot, whereas like for him, like playing was like an expression of art, right? And he's kind of similar to Daigo in that sense, whereas like the only true joy in like in competing is expressing your individuality, right? So what do you think about esports as like performance art, I guess? Like what do you think of it as, like when you're looking at a player, like when you're looking at a player like, or like the Chengdu Hunters or whatever, like doesn't it, like just from a personal level, like a philosophical level, does it make more sense to like play towards your own artistic endeavors rather than trying to win? Or what do you think? Because that's a very complicated question.
It's only complicated in this, like I think it's only complicated in the sense that there's an easy answer to this, which is that no.
Right.
But at the same time, you still no. I don't know, because I think you need to stay true to yourself all the while. I mean, at the end of the day, what does it come down to when you're in a position? Whatever you need to do to win, you do.
Yeah.
Now you can still be in those styles. Like my mind kind of comes back to StarCraft 2 in a sense. I mean, you can go for the same builds, but how you play those builds, that's where you get the self-expression, right? You can have guys who run the exact same build. One will play it aggressive and one will play it very defensive, reactive.
Yeah, like difference between like Marine King and Tasia, for instance.
Wow, yeah, that's a throwback. Or Serral. You know, to me, Serral really comes to.
Yeah.
Where
Cyril compared to like Life, like I mean, if Life still
he's
played, like Life would play that really aggressive. He wouldn't play like
Yes,
Cyril does.
Life would try to rip your balls off, and Cyril is just content to let you drop your balls into Vice, which is his, macro micro perfection,
Mm-hmm.
and that's pretty much what's going on. When it like you have that style, they would run the same. They would run the same build. It's just how they would play it. That to me is like the self expression that's really obvious in StarCraft 2 in a way, because you can have very aggressive players who really try and set the pace and really just you can't hold them back. They want to get in your face. They want to take the fight to you. They want to mess with you. And then you'll have players like Snoot, I guess, was seen as a very defensive styled player who was always reactive, just waiting to see what you're going to do, shutting it down, and slowly but surely just grinding you down, right? So you can't. I 100% agree with the idea that esports is is an expression of yourself. That's where it can get really painful and personal, though, because if you're playing, because at the end of the day, you're still playing to win.
Yeah.
So if you're expressing yourself and your style,
But you're losing, it's painful.
But you're losing. Oof, that's a bit of a spicy. It's a spicy meatball right there. That's
that is a painful realization. You're just not good enough.
Right? Yeah, you're just or your style is just not good enough. Sadly, with games, there is also that realization that perhaps the game isn't in the right place to allow you to shine, right? So, I mean, take Overwatch for example. Why we haven't seen Sibylbi and Pine? It's not because they aren't any less, It's not they're not worse players. They're not worse players than they were last year. Pine is still an aim god, but it's just that the game isn't really there to allow them to express themselves. And so, why would you put them in when you can put players in who the game state favors more, right?
Yeah.
But but at the end of the day, that is team comes in is when you're competing, you're in it to win. So at the end of the day, you can have all of the self-expression that you want getting you wins. If you're self-expressing and you're just constantly losing, well then you're not going to have a team. Yeah. So I think it's a luxury thing.
It's a luxury. You're allowed to express yourself as long as you're good enough.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, why not? It's just like, hey, I would love to. It's like talking about a guy who can't pay bills, but he wants to express himself by fucking painting murals all day.
It's cool, but you're not gonna survive, are you?
You're not gonna pay your bills if you're doing murals for free. And by the way, to those murals, that's the cost of paying you your paycheck and flying you to these events and whatnot. So long as it works, maybe I'm a little bit more pragmatic in that sense.
All right.
I see the poetic side to it, where it's just like, yes, you want to express yourself at all times, but I'm much more in the side of where it's just like, yeah, express yourself so long as you're doing your job.
All right. Here's a different.
I mean, Shoxy was a beast because Shoxy he was able to rip everybody's heads off at will. He could do everything. Yeah. Shoxy always said, if I could have 5 Shoxys, I would be the best. It would be, we would just dominate everything. Yeah. Because you could legitimately do everything, but yeah.
5 Shoxys is a pretty good team.
That would be a pretty sick team. I'd put my money on that team.
Yeah. But all right, here I guess here's an addendum to that point, I guess. Like, do you think there are different qualities in wins?
Sure, you got your. What do you mean by that? I mean, if you're winning against like a David Goliath situation, or
like, all right, like here's how I put it. Like, among MVP's GSLs, I'd say the best GSL he ever won was against Squirtle, right?
Oh man, you're busting out names that I haven't heard. Yes, okay, Squirtle, sure.
Right, because the way that GSL worked out, basically. We know now MVP had 5 slip discs straight up, like 2 in the neck, 3 in the back, but we didn't know back then. But we didn't. But what made the run so epic was the fact that basically he was playing his worst matchup, TVP, and he plays against Naniwa, who I'd say was a top 3 Protoss at the time, arguably easily the best foreigner, and arguably one of the best in the world. Beats him, plays against Parting, who was arguably the best PVT in the world, then beats Squirtle, who was the best Protoss in the world, right? And he beats them back to back to back. And even in like the Squirtle series, it goes all 7 games, and like he loses the cheese, and then he comes back and wins with a second cheese, which is what made the entire thing so epic, right? And so that's sort of like the victory that makes him like at least at the time like the greatest of all time at that point, right? And you look at And then you look at the other like you look at the other like trophies people have. Like there's always going to be certain victories that have like that have higher quality of value to them in a sense. Like
Sure.
right, like I think like if you look at the greatest of all time Fnatic team from the CS:GO lineup, I'd say their best trophy was the clone one, where they had to pull out ridiculous comebacks against Virtus Pro and Envious to win.
Yeah,
Right?
Dust 2.
Dust 2 like down a billion, like Virtus Pro really knocked them the fuck out, right?
Or to me, the quality win would be Nip winning the major.
Or NIM winning that major because they really didn't. It really, I don't say they shouldn't have, but like they weren't as nearly as good as they once were.
They shouldn't have, but to me that was one of the craziest because it was the legitimizing the legacy, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're talking about, this team that had just dominated the beginning of CSGO, and then it was still a threat. It was always a threat in tournaments, but had not had that level of dominance. But you always thought they're going to win the first major. They fluke out and don't win that major. Mm-hmm. Second major, nope, still no go. And it's just like, when are these guys going to win a major? Yeah, so right. In terms of value wins, that's probably still one of the most important wins. I bet I could ask Get Right today, and he'd probably put it up there in like top 2. Mm-hmm. Just because that legitimized the legacy of an IP that, okay, yes, they won a major. Yes, they legitimately were the best in the world for a period of time.
Yeah. So
multiple. Yeah.
So you agree, like there are different values in trophies or victories or whatever, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're gonna have I don't think you can argue against that. I mean, there's a big difference between winning an online tournament and then a major, and then a major, and then whatever. Did I say major twice? I think I meant
you said major twice.
Like world championship, right? But like major, you know what I mean? Like you're always going to have the difference. You're always going to have different tiers to tournaments and value to the win, but then you're going to get the personal story. That's where the commentator comes in, I suppose, where we need to try and make it clear to people that what's on the line for these players and what trials and tribulations have they gone through to get to this point. And so maybe this tournament means just a little bit more, like what Dupree with the last one. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe that win means just a little bit more because of X reason.
Yeah, right. So basically, what I'm pointing out here is like if you do win, like playing this artistic style I was talking about, like very very specific on your own, like individuality as a player, like those victories would mean more. Is what I'm saying. Like,
I see what you mean.
Like that's basically what I'm coming down to. Like, yeah, like.
I think you would just have to work a lot harder.
But you would have to work a lot harder. Like
sweat a lot for those victories, right? You have to work.
It makes it so much better. It's why like people still remember like Dirk's ring, right, against the Heat. So it was like, because the harder it is, the better the victory. So
for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think about covers it. I'm sure we could talk hours more or whatever, but
I think we could, but then it wouldn't be so much of an interview. But
I'm pretty sure the interview devolved like halfway already, right?
Yeah.
All right. You have any last words you want to say to anybody out there?
Thank you for tuning in, guys. We'll be back with the Overwatch League in just we will be back there, and then at the end of the year, who knows? But Stuchu, thanks for having me on, man. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for coming on. See you guys later.